You can't really stop Erling Haaland, but what is the best approach? Stick Dan Burn on him for a wrestle?
The way Norway win this match is if Haaland has a good game and England's defensive problems come to the fore. You know, England's strengths are not in defence.
There's no doubt that the strength of European football has come to the fore.
If anyone beats France, I suspect they're going to win the tournament.
Hello and welcome to The Game, football podcast from The Times and Sunday Times. This is day 28 of our daily World Cup shows and it is quarter-final time. I'm Tom Clarke and I'm joined today by the football reporter Tom Allnutt and the former footballer turned journalist Gregor Robertson. And on today's show we'll be running through all four games and offering our usual top-notch analysis and predictions. Team, welcome. Here we are. We've made it through the worst day of the World Cup so far without a game. Now we're back. Thank God the football begins again. And Tom, hello. Welcome back. You're in your home. You're back home from the World Cup. How are you feeling? Sad, depressed, dreaming of Curacao? What's the vibes?
Took a few days to get over the jet lag. I got the kind of traditional flu as soon as I got back. Body sort of said it needed a day off as well. But yeah, still dreaming of Curacao. It's true. It takes a while to kind of. I mean, it was a fantastic trip, and I think an amazing. I think it's been a brilliant World Cup. I have to say, it's ticked so many boxes. But I think by the time I'd had sort of 6 barbecue dinners in Houston out of about 7 or 8 days, I think my body was kind of saying it's time to go find some salad. And that's nothing against the barbecue scene in Texas, by the way. Lovely brisket, fantastic fries, cheese with everything. It's good stuff, but after a while you need to find something a little bit more nourishing. Yeah, but it was a good trip. I think it's been a great tournament.
Great World Cup lacking salad is probably the best analysis I've heard so far. Best moment, favourite game, best moment, thing that you'll remember always?
I mean, I think it's been said in the last few days because of the England game in Mexico, but I really felt the games that I did in Mexico were, I did the opening game, for example, at the Azteca, and just the atmosphere there, walking, our shuttle bus from our hotel in Mexico City to the Azteca very much failed because the traffic was so bad and they had to drop us off about 20 minutes from the stadium, which we thought was sort of maybe just kind of teething problems on the first day of the World Cup. But I think that has generally been the routine in Mexico City. And you sort of get off the bus and you're kind of walking down what is just sort of a kind of winding lane, really, towards the Azteca, and you can kind of see the stadium in the distance on the skyline, and just sort of alongside this street are just sort of all these kind of pop up. I don't know, really, they're not restaurants; they're just kind of shacks. People just kind of cooking things on the grill, and that kind of smell of tacos and meat and pork and then people just kind of sitting on the side of the street, sort of drinking beers, and you just think like this is the World Cup, right? Like you're walking towards, one of the most kind of historic stadiums, and it's a really wonderful atmosphere. And I think that has, Mexico is, in terms of the host, I think it was a really special place to be. And I have to say, in terms of the US, like I think it was a real variety. I think that's been the experience of a lot of reporters. And, obviously I didn't get around to every single city, but it seems like there have been 3 or 4 really sort of buzzy, magical places to be. I don't know, Boston, for example. I went to Seattle, which was a, really vibey place with just really nice people and people out on the streets, and you could really feel the World Cup atmosphere. Maybe in other places slightly quieter, and that's what America's like, right? Like it's not one country; it's a country made up of lots and lots of very different places, And I think in terms of the variety and the mix, it was a really fascinating place to be.
Joyous stuff. A lovely start to this quarterfinals preview. Now, Gregor, I've got exciting news for you. The most joy you have on this podcast is whenever I ask you for a prediction. The next most joy is when we review those predictions and we see how wrong we truly were. Me, you and Tony Cascarino did our map to the final, and I'm excited to remind all listeners of what we predicted would be the quarterfinals. Started strong, France v Morocco. That's 1 out of 1. However, we then said it would be Spain v Senegal. Listen, I think we're a late goal away from that being true. I think Senegal would have beaten USA. Here's the big overestimation. England v Japan. Japan, what happened, lads?
They were close as well against Brazil.
And then Argentina, Colombia. In many ways, this should have been the quarterfinal, but I'll let it go.
Imagine the sight and sound of that. It would have been incredible.
Never mind, we have still got 4 very exciting quarterfinals. Any surprises, though, generally? I was reflecting after recording the show, Gregor completing the round of 16. we've got 6 out of 8 European teams for a quarterfinals of a tournament that many people said, the European teams won't be able to hack it conditions-wise. Quite interesting, or actually maybe just a sign of the strength of European football right now? Tom, Gregor, what do you think about that idea?
Look, when you came out of the group phase, I think 9 out of 10 African countries qualified for the round of 32, and everyone, that was the conversation then. And then, now we're just left with Morocco. I think each individual case is very different, and there are also some of these nations who've had very mixed tournaments. I mean, think of Belgium. Belgium were deeply average for a large spell of it. Nearly went out against Senegal, and then they were outstanding against the US. And now you're suddenly looking at them thinking, this is going to be a tough proposition for Spain. Even Spain have started with that draw against Cape Verde. Still been pretty unimpressive in some games. I'm not sure they're anywhere near the same level as they were 4 years ago, but you still feel there's potential there. So, and like Norway were the team that everyone was tipping as a dark horse, and it turned out to be even more than that. They look like potential winners at this rate. So, I think each individual sort of case is unique, but there's no doubt that the strength of European football has come to the fore.
Yeah, I wonder if, for example, European club football is obviously, so strong now. You do wonder if, for example, like Brazil, I think there's going to be a real sort of identity crisis now about kind of Brazilian football, because Ancelotti obviously being appointed at the top, but it kind of runs all the way through this kind of battle almost for the kind of soul of Brazilian football. What are we? And then that is very much the kind of debate, I think, in Brazil now. They're sort of hiring lots of Portuguese coaches, in Brazilian domestic football. A lot of the academies are sort of trying to produce players almost that are kind of retrofitted to kind of fit European clubs, because that's the way they sell players. And that's, they know they're basically trying to sell to the kind of European super club market. And you just kind of wonder, will these countries actually sort of think, is this the way to do it? Like, do we want to sort of play like European clubs? Do we want to set up like European clubs? Is that the only way you can win these tournaments? But, I think that there is maybe a sense that a lot of these countries are so sort of through the lens of European football domestically. You wonder if they're sort of starting to lose something. But I tend to agree with Gregor. I think, for example, the African teams just quite tough draws, to be honest, and I think that is part of it as well.
Yeah, interesting. Let's get into the games then. France v Morocco, and let's start with the only remaining African nation, Morocco. Delighted, I've got to say, for them to have reached this point, a World Cup quarter-final, because so much is made of them at previous tournament and now at this one. Are they the dark horses? Could they be the African team that goes a long way? This is a hugely exciting game, isn't it? So let's start with them. So much has been discussed around France. I'm not sure we've got anything left to say about them. I'm sure we'll give it a go in a second. But Tom, what have we liked about this Morocco side? Because there's been lots of players to pick out. I've really enjoyed Neil El Ayanawi in midfield next to Bouadi. I think both of those players are really terrific midfielders. You had Unawi getting goals against Canada. Even off the bench, they lose Saibari to injury. Rahimi comes off the bench and looks really good. Like, this is a really strong squad of players, isn't it? It's not just Ashraf Hakimi and Brahim Diaz. Like, it's a proper squad of really high-end players.
Yeah, and I like the way Morocco play. Like, I was in Mexico for the last 32 game against Netherlands, and Netherlands were sort of trying to be solid and slightly pragmatic in that kind of Koeman way. But Morocco, I think, they've got an athletic team. They're athletic, but they also kind of they attack quickly. And I think they can cause teams problems. It's almost a shame, I think, they're playing against France, because I sort of think France play a bit like Morocco, but better, and their style might not be the one to kind of bring down France. I wonder if Morocco were playing, for example, against Spain or something like that, or even England, they might have a better kind of opportunity to cause an upset. I think you've nailed it there, Tom, really. I think the midfielders, Bouadi and El Aynaoui have been, fantastic. And me and Gregor were just kind of saying before we came online that, El Aynaoui was brilliant 4 years ago as well. And you're sort of surprised that he hasn't kind of, been picked up. And maybe 20 years ago, he would have been in a World Cup kind of, just sort of taken on by Liverpool or something. But I also like the fullbacks. I think Hakimi and Mazraoui really sort of they give so much energy and tireless running. Hakimi clearly with his quality on the ball and his delivery is the best right back in the world. Whereas and Mazraoui the other side sort of just brings a kind of bite and tirelessness. And I think they're a dangerous team. I really think they are. And there's obviously a lot of intrigue with this match with France because the history between the teams. And there are so many kind of shared connections between the sides. Boadi, for example, I think really in France, they feel like he was kind of one of the ones who got away, that they were sort of surprised almost. They've sort of been used to kind of cherry picking the ones they really want France, and maybe some, Moroccan players who play for France, who play for Morocco, who are born in France, tends to be the ones who thought they couldn't get in the French team. Boadi, I think, is, not necessarily one of those. And there are, Diop, for example, I think was in the, I think it was the under-19 Euros winning team of sort of, 10 years ago or something with France. So he sort of knows a lot of the sort of French players very well. So it's going to feel a little bit like I don't know if a derby, but a kind of like a mates game, like a lot of them are in kind of shared WhatsApp groups. And I think that brings an extra kind of edge to this match. It's like there's a real sense of, almost the French kind of B team playing against the A team, and I think they'll really want to kind of go and prove a point. So yeah, I really like this game. I don't know if it's the one I would circle for an upset, but I hope so, to be honest, because I really like Morocco.
Interesting. Gregor, Tom picking out lots of good points there. Interesting you mentioned Achraf Hakimi. I saw a stat that his 15 chances created in the current tournament are already the most by an African defender in any edition of the competition. Clearly a hugely important part as well. Mazraoui, you're picking out there. Another great example of a Premier League player I'm watching thinking, Man United are sorted for next season. He's amazing. If Mazraoui can produce those performances for Manchester United, their defence will be in a good shape for next season. Gregor, thoughts on Morocco? Tom making the point that any team going up against France would be tricky, but actually they might be two well-matched teams in lots of respects.
I think I said the other week that I don't know. I think Morocco, because of how impressively started in the game against Brazil, I've been slightly disappointed. I don't think they've quite lived up to that level again. You think about, they squeezed past Scotland. The game against Haiti was a bit of a basketball match. The Netherlands was a physical duel and, came through in penalties. And the Canada game was never a 3-0 game. I think they had 5 shots and scored 3 goals. So I think there's more in them. And I hope that we see more against France. And it might be that a game that's more open could suit them as well. I think the midfield battle will be fascinating in this game because France, we came into the tournament thinking that was almost their weak point. Rabiot and Kone or Tchouaméni. Tchouaméni's injured, I think, so it's probably going to be Kone. Rabiot's been brilliant, actually. Kone's been pretty impressive too. But they've not faced any midfield like Morocco's in terms of both the physicality and the sort of craft and guile. Boadi is a physical specimen for it, an 18-year-old. It's incredible. The ground he covers, how he can just shrug people off the ball. He's a monster. Allnutt is a box-to-box player as well. And Unai's got the kind of the real craft in the moments of in those tight spaces he can create something. So France will need to be on their A game in the centre of the pitch, I think. I think France have all that too. They do. They've got Olise in the number 10 and they've got and as I said, Rabiot and Kone have played really well. So I think that's going to be an important area of the pitch. And it'll also be interesting to see how, you mentioned Hakimi, to see how France deal with that. I would say that Digne, although he's had a good tournament, again, is an area where an opponent can get at France. He's not a stellar defender, and coming up against Hakimi, who is a buccaneering player, he's not like a normal right back. He can drift into number 10 areas, or he can be up and down the line as well. I think that's a possible area for Morocco to get at France. So it's got the makings of a great game, rerun of the 2022 semi-final. As Tom mentioned, a lot of kind of shared history and sort of other history between the nations as well. I think it's going to be a cracker, but I would be really amazed if France don't come through.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably the prevailing thought here, Tom. I'm pretty sure from memory, I haven't given you the chance to wax lyrical about France, so I'm going to do that now. I mean, this is a special team, isn't it, that Morocco are going up against?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it feels to me like the winner of what will probably be the France-Spain semi-final is probably going to win the tournament. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. So, it feels to me like that is, I think those are the two. I mean, Spain in a slightly different way, just very kind of controlled, and maybe we'll talk about them later. But I think France just have that, they have that explosiveness, right? Like, and in the final third, you compare them to the other teams, they just have, 4 match winners, basically 4 players who, can pull a rabbit out of the hat at any moment, and I think it's interesting, the kind of more broadly, the sort of tactical trend of this World Cup, after watching a Premier League season where so much has been, slightly turgid, slightly sort of robotics, set piece football, it's been a real sort of breath of fresh air to see so much kind of up and down football, based on kind of 1v1s, dribblers, and France have all of that in spades, right? Like that is, they are kind of either setting the agenda or they're very much tapping into it because they have the best 1v1 attackers, in the world. Basically, you'd probably say that the top 4 out of the 5, are basically playing for France. So, yeah, I mean, I think if anyone beats France, I suspect they're gonna win the tournament, right? I mean, that's sort of my feeling.
Unless they use up all that might to beat them in this quarterfinal and then can't go any further, as we often see sometimes. Let's have a prediction then. You struggle to get past France and look past France. I mean, I'm slightly tempted to go for Morocco, given your assessment, Tom, but I think I'll have to go with France. What do we reckon, Gregor?
Yeah, it should be France. If France perform anywhere near as they can, they've been the best team by a mile. So it's impossible to predict anything else. But football is a funny old game. You never know.
It is. Tom?
I think I would pick Morocco to be an upset in this round if they weren't playing France. So I'm going France as well, yeah.
I would pick Morocco if they weren't playing France because therefore they wouldn't be the underdog. So I'll pick them, but it just doesn't quite work.
We're just tying ourselves in knots to avoid saying France, move on.
That's like, I want to be Alison Rudd and as bold as Alison Rudd, but I can't quite bring myself to say something as mad and things as she sometimes says. Anyway, we'll come on to Norway in just a second. France then is the prediction for that quarter-final. They would face the winners of Spain v Belgium. Belgium, I'm endlessly fascinated by this team. I can't quite work it out. Tom, your thoughts on Spain then? Gregor alluded to it before, maybe not quite delivered to the same heights as they managed in Euro 2024, and I think that's probably fair, but still very impressive. I mean, they've kept a clean sheet in each of their last 6 FIFA World Cup games, the longest run by any side in the competition's history. At this year's tournament, they are averaging an expected goals against per game of just 0.3, the lowest on record by any team in any edition of the finals. However, Belgium are averaging 21.4 shots per game at this year's tournament, only averaging more in 1970, and their shot conversion rate this tournament of 12.1% is also the highest on record, behind 2018. So Belgium are scoring for fun, and Spain have got the best defence. Could be a cracker, could go penalties, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Spain have been a funny team, I think, so far. Have they gone under the radar? I feel like they have. I mean, they haven't sort of put together a sort of brilliant swashbuckling performance yet. But equally, I think, it's funny. This is sort of the advantage, I think, of when you have won stuff. Like, everything that kind of happens serves as sort of confirmation bias in terms of optimism. Whereas you compare it to, for example, England, like everything is like, oh, we're not playing well. This feels like, this previous World Cup, or, we know if we're not doing this, it's going to happen again. Like, whereas for Spain, it's like, oh, Mikel Merino scored again in the last minute. That's what happened in the Euros 2 years ago. So, we're clearly on the right track. Or it's like, we're not conceding goals. We've got brilliant defence. Yeah, very much like 2010 when we won the World Cup. You have all these kind of reference points, which makes everyone feel good about everything because you just sort of feel like you have a winning history. And Spain have that confidence at the moment. Like, they're not playing brilliantly, but I think, you read everything that's sort of in the Spanish press, you hear what the players are talking about. Everything kind of feels like they think it's going to plan, and I think, if you think about their sort of midfield, Pedri and Rodri, I still come back to the point that I think if France's, main trump card is to have attackers, game changers who can, beat players and score goals at any moment, I still think Spain's major trump card in a tournament where, the heat could be more of a factor as it goes on, and fatigue, is that they can just suffocate teams in possession, and I think, you look at that game against Portugal, it wasn't at all a particularly interesting match, but I never felt like Spain were really out of sync. They can control games from that midfield base. And listen, I I guess, we're going to see, because I think Belgium in a way is maybe the first sort of test. I don't think Belgium are sort of a real top team, I have to say, at the World Cup. I haven't really been massively impressed by them generally. I think in a way the US, in LA might have been even a slightly tougher game for Spain in a weird way. But I still think, Spain quietly looked to me like a really impressive team, and Lamine was still, I think, is gathering momentum as the tournament goes on. But mainly they just look at a team who are confident and in control, and I still think that them against France is going to be the probably decisive match of the tournament in the semi-final.
Yeah, Tom makes a good point there about experience, Gregor, and that reassurance that fans and Spain players can have. That does count for a lot, doesn't it? In some ways, saying at a quarter-final stage, oh, well, they've underwhelmed, can be a good thing.
Yeah, perhaps. Look, I think Spain have played well once against Austria. 3-0, completely dominant. That was a brilliant performance. Completely suffocated them. Obviously they started with the 0-0 draw against Cape Verde, then they thrashed Saudi Arabia 4-0, but it was Saudi Arabia. Uruguay game was a battle, and they edged it. And the Portugal game was, they just edged it. Someone came on and scored, Marino came on and scored the winner late on. There wasn't much between the teams. So I don't think Spain are, Lamal is obviously the unknown. If he really, really is on song, then he could win them the tournament single-handedly, just about. I still think although Olise is kind of challenging him just now, I think he's the best player on the planet. And also the kind of stats you gave at the start there, again, you've got to get the context of the teams they're playing against. And like Belgium, when you think about, they thrashed New Zealand 5-1, and was one of those games. New Zealand, one of the lowest ranked teams in the competition. Before that, they drew 0-0 with Iran. Before that, they drew 1-1 with Egypt. They started really poorly. And the Senegal game, they were almost out. But the USA game, given all the context, and even without the context, was a really impressive performance. They absolutely battered the US, and the US were a team that we looked at throughout the tournament and thought, this is a decent team. They played with great energy. They had a lot of kind of momentum built up, and there was a lot of positivity created around the tournament by this team, and they swept them aside. So they go into the game in a good place. But as I say, it's been a strange tournament for both, I think, and how much that matters when you get into another knockout game, I'm not sure. I think Spain are the best team, and Tom's right. Their sort of the sense of control that they can have over a game could well prove decisive. I
mean, it's a bit of a theme of the tournament, isn't it, really? Because of the new format, I think you sort of get to the quarterfinals, and for a lot of these big teams, you sort of think, well, we still don't know much about them, because they haven't played teams that where in a normal World Cup, you might say, oh yeah, they remember that brilliant match where they beat Chile or something in the group stage, or they beat the Netherlands, and you think, yeah, we know what this Spain team are about because they've played against a couple of class oppositions already. Because the groups are so sort of, the standard is so low, in all honesty. You can get to the last 16 and you still haven't really seen the real contenders have a massive test. I mean, England are the asterisk there, because I think Mexico, were, but even that was in a certain way, it was kind of more the conditions and the occasion rather than the opposition. So we're sort of looking at these sides like Spain and even Argentina and thinking, well, yeah, we've seen what they can do against kind of, third, perhaps second tier opposition, but now is when we're going to see them against top tier opposition. I mean, it's possible. Spain's a weird one, because you could, if they lose to Belgium, I think you would say, there'll be a big sort of, thing where they didn't really play very well at this tournament. What happened? What it was quite a poor tournament for Spain, right? That can just suddenly come out of the blue. But ultimately, if they keep on rolling, then, they're going to gather momentum as the tournament goes on.
Yeah, well, I'd wanted Belgium out of this tournament. I said that in our show with Tony Cascarino. I was quite upset about their performances in the group stage. And I think just because I'd seen all their players before, I like seeing exciting things that I had not seen before. But they were very, very impressive against the USA. Both these teams, lovely away kits. I don't think they will both be wearing them, but Spain away kit and Belgium's away kit, both very enjoyable indeed. Let's finish with a prediction then. I think it feels like a Spain win. I'm going to go Spain win. Sorry, Belgium, you've had enough fun now. I want a Spain-France semi-final. Tom?
Yeah, 2-0. Yeah, 1-0, 2-0. Yeah.
Gregor?
Yeah, I think it'll be a Spain win. There's just a lot of still a kind of uncertainty about the Belgian team, not just because of all the things I said before, but they benched. You talk about we know all the players, we do know all of them, but De Bruyne, Lukaku, Doku were all on the bench against USA. Onana's done his ACL. That's a big loss. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to approach this game from a team selection point of view. But ultimately, if Spain are on song, and particularly Yamal, they'll win the game.
See if Rudy Garcia's got some tricks up his sleeve on the Belgian bench. But a France-Spain semi-final is the predictions from part 1 of the show. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a sec to review the other 2 quarterfinals. Welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from the Times and Sunday Times. These are our daily World Cup shows with me, Tom Clarke, Tom Allnutt and Gregor Robertson. And it's time to preview probably the toughest tie to call, I think, England against Norway. The Game Podcast versus Alison Rudd. It's exciting. And Gregor Robertson, to be fair, I should say. Sorry, Gregor, to put you on the England side there. Terrible from me. You've got the Norway flag flying in the background.
You're pushing a false narrative here, Tom. I'm supportive, don't worry. Until the final.
Until the final. Oh, yeah, that's the rule. That's the rule, isn't it?
Then I'm conflicted and I don't know how I'd feel. Anyway, let's move on.
This one is probably the toughest to call, would we say, Gregor?
Yeah, I think so. Mainly because you just don't know if it's possible to stop Erling Haaland. I don't know whether the familiarity is a positive or not. He's just a phenomenon, and it promises to be another fascinating game. Seeing him doing very little, but always knowing that he's prowling, menacing, and capable of winning the game. So, I really, really enjoyed watching Norway. I think they're to play Brazil and have, I think, 66% of the ball, make more than 300 more passes than them. Like, part of that is to do with the way Brazil approached this game and other games under Ancelotti, but also it shows that Norway are happy being the kind of the team in control, but they've got different sides to them. They're a bit like England in that regard. They can play like that, and they can also sit in and soak up pressure. I've got some big kind of physical, dominant defenders, and one of the best midfields, I think, in the tournament. I've absolutely loved watching Patrick Berg. I think he's been outstanding for them. So much energy, but also really neat with the ball at his feet. Odegaard has been a warrior actually for them, as well as the kind of the midfielder who's got that bit of craft and guile, and Sander Berg kind of complements them. I think there's a real balance to their midfield, so that's been another big strength for them. And it'd be interesting to see what they who they choose out wide after making the changes at half time in the last game, bringing on Oscar Bob, taking off Nusa and Sorloth. So not entirely sure how they'll set up in this game, but. It's a very, very hard one to call, but mainly because of Haaland.
Tom, thoughts on this one? I mean, of England's 53 different defensive options that they've already used at this tournament, basically tried every defender in every different position. I mean, how do you answer Gregor's question? You can't really stop Erling Haaland, but what is the best approach? Stick Dan Burn on him for a wrestle? Play Stones and Guehi, who've two teammates at Manchester City? Where do England go here? Do they stop supply lines? What's the option?
Yeah, they adopt the sort of, Mexico rear guard in the final 11 minutes just for the whole thing. Get the back five in action, get Burn on. You can't, right? I mean, you can't. We know because we cover the Premier League week in, week out, and we often come up with these questions about how do you stop Haaland. You can't. You have to get close to him. Obviously, you have to keep an eye on him all the time. And I guess Guehi, knows him well, at least. That's the best thing you can say. But this is not an area of strength for England, right? Like the way Norway win this match is if Haaland has a good game and England's defensive problems come to the fore. England's strengths are not in defence. We've seen that. I mean, even in the Mexico game, they conceded soft goals. And we can talk, and people have written, brilliant pieces about the togetherness and the unity and coming through what was, clearly a war almost in the Azteca, but. In the black and white football performance, there were still problems with that England game, in my opinion. Did that make me think they are better equipped to beat the best teams in the tournament? I don't know. I still think that defence is a major problem. And now they're coming up against, with all respect, not Raul Jimenez, who is, a decent Premier League striker. They're coming up against the best, striker in the world, and. that's a problem for England. You know, if they're going to win this match, they're going to win it in other areas, right? You know, Norway have a good team, and you know, Berg, for example, in midfield have had a really good tournament. Equally, I think, you know, Anderson and Rice would feel like they can win that battle. You know, I think England going forward now, it feels like Gordon had a really good game against Mexico. You know, I think Saka looks like he's kind of coming into a little bit of fitness, hopefully. You know, obviously Kane and Bellingham are in, you know, scintillating form. And in a way, you know, Norway will be looking at Kane and Bellingham and thinking, you know, these are two absolute, you know, stars who are playing fantastically. You know, can we keep them out? You know, and I think that's where England win this match. You know, if it comes down to a Haaland versus, you know, England's central defence, then England aren't going through. You know, in all honesty. But if I think coming out of the Azteca with the kind of feeling of togetherness and momentum that England have, I think that will stand them in good stead in this game. You know, thank goodness they've had, you know, nearly a week to recover, because I feel like if this was a sort of a Premier League season where that was a European match and they had to play a match 3 days later, they'd be in real trouble, because I suspect they're completely exhausted right now. But I think overall, I think they'll have enough to beat Norway.
England have to stop the supply line to Haaland, and like you can't do that when it's from back to front. You just can't. You have to be well. You know, you have to have someone covering at all times, and someone who's tight and doesn't allow him to turn, or does their best. But you can try your best to stop crosses and deliveries from wide areas. And the way Scheiderlup kind of skipped down the line against Brazil and was allowed to put that cross in, that was it. I don't know how that ties into England's issues at right back, and also, you know, Nico O'Reilly is better going forward than he is defensively. But that's something there that's really, really important, because we saw how he just comes alive in those moments. So it might sound simplistic, but it's kind of true, because, you know, those kind of him getting the ball in tight areas around the penalty box and stuff. That's not his biggest strength. It's when he's got big open spaces to run into when it's played from back to front, or when a cross comes into the box and he can steal a yard, or he can just overpower his opponent. That's the avenues that England need to be most aware of.
Do we think then it could be a similar game to the one you outlined, where Norway are having more possession then, and that England are actually just trying to stop the passes and stop the kind of quick turnovers and things, and actually England are the ones looking for the quick turnovers, as they did against Mexico in that 98-second blitz?
I think there will be periods of the game like that, but I think kind of the game state will be important. If England take an early lead, then yeah, they'll be content to do that. And I think we've seen that already in the tournament. If not, then, you know, you need to try and take the game to the opposition. So yeah, it will be an interesting tactical battle, but I think how the game sort of unfurls as well will be important.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, another part of this tournament that we maybe haven't heard from you on is the brilliance of Kane and Bellingham. As you say there, the Game Podcast Norwegian equivalent will be sat talking about how do we stop Harry Kane in the same way we're talking about Erling Haaland. I think actually that's where Alison Rudd's been for the last 2 weeks. She's not actually been at Wimbledon. She's been seconded to the Game Podcast Norway version after all her brilliant and wild praise for them before the tournament began. It has been fantastic to see Harry Kane, hasn't it? I mean, deliver on the world stage in such a brilliant, I am clutch, I am the superstar of this team and I will drag you through. Yeah, I mean, it makes me think, actually, you know, I was lucky enough to do a lot of covering Spurs between kind of 2014 and, you know, 2022. And at the time, you know, we always, you know, this thing about Kane being underrated, whatever, yada, yada, yada. Not anymore. But I do think, you know, I sort of look back now and think what a privilege it was to cover Harry Kane, you know, to see Harry Kane playing for Spurs in the Premier League week in, week out. Because, you know, you think now this guy is probably going to go down as England's greatest ever player, you know, I think, you know, and maybe he'll go down as a World Cup winning legend. You never know. Like he might even win the Ballon d'Or this year if kind of things work out, you know, and I always come back to that thing with Kane, right? Like it's a different thing to Messi and to you know, even, you know, Lamine Yamal, for example. You know, he's a sort of Andy Murray sportsman, right? Like he's someone who has just worked and worked and worked, you know. And you talk to all the kind of, when you do these sort of profile pieces about, you know, Kane, you talk to the people at the beginning, you know, they don't talk like they do about other superstars, where they say, oh, you know, he got the ball and he scored 8 goals, you know, like, or we knew we had to put him up three age categories because he was so good, you know, like with Kane, everyone sort of says, he was all right. He was all right. But actually, you know, he asked a lot of questions, you know, they sort of say this kind of thing, or, you know, yeah, he was always really curious, you know, like, and so they're almost trying to find things that were good about Kane in those early days, because in truth,
he wasn't a superstar, like, and he never has been really, like, in the early days of his career. But to have sort of extracted that much end product and brilliance, just from sheer practice, and to got to where he's got to now, which is ultimately, I think he's the outstanding centre forward. We talk about Haaland as a kind of a finisher, out and out predator, but I think as an all round centre forward, I think Kane is unmatched at the moment in world football. And I think in Bellingham and Kane, if you ask me why are England going to win the World Cup, if I sort of put my hat on in 3 months' time and look back, you're clearly thinking it's because of Kane and Bellingham. Why will people in 30 years' time say, why did England win the World Cup in 2026? It was because Kane and Bellingham were absolutely, like, on fire, and if they can keep that going now and deliver those decisive moments in the biggest moments now in the quarterfinals, semi-finals and possibly final, that's what's going to win England the tournament.
To get there, then, you're thinking they will beat Norway, then, Tom, as a prediction?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do think they'll beat Norway, yeah. I have a slight concern about a hangover after Mexico, just the sort of get going again factor, but I think it's enough, the space they have, and I think they'll have enough, yeah. I think they'll win.
Gregor?
Yeah, just. I think the same is true of wide areas will be so important. Like, you've watched some of this tournament, and David Muller-Wolf, the Wolves left back, has looked really good going forward, but then he's a little bit suspect defensively, and in fact he didn't. There's a reason why he didn't play all that many games for Wolves last season, and that's a team that were relegated. So I think, again, if Saka's fit and available, he can get the better of him. And Gordon against Ryerson, I think Gordon could have the legs over him. So England depend a lot on those players producing. And we saw that in the Mexico game as well. I don't know. I'm talking myself around this. I think England should have enough, but I think it will be tight. I think it could be cagey. I think it could go to extra time.
Yeah, really interesting. One of my favourite moments on this podcast, and there are so many, is the Gregor Robertson deep intake of breath after I've asked him for a tricky prediction, as he looks inside himself and think, am I actually going to say England are going to win this game? Yes, he has. How's
he got on, Gregor? What's his prediction sort of rate been like in this tournament?
Solid. I mean, he covers himself, doesn't he, Tom? Let's be honest. There's a lot of hedging that goes on. He says one thing and then actually gives a good excuse as to why it should actually be the other thing. So
yeah, he's a coward, really. Yeah.
He's safe from the clip economy. Jonathan, our amazing video producer, could probably produce a clip for him saying any of these teams could win the World Cup at some point along the way. He's a canny operator like that. As well as Alison Rudd falling in love with this Norway team in general, I have fallen in love with their social media content. It is the most wonderfully joyous thing to watch all the time. But there was a really good video after the win against Brazil, and their manager talking about, we had a plan and you guys executed it, so they will definitely be ready for England. I just think England are going to, I just can see this semi-final. I just think they'll get there. Let's finish then with the final game in the quarterfinals, Argentina against Switzerland. And Gregor, we were rightly reprimanded by producer Neil for our show yesterday, talking about Argentina and then ending up talking about Egypt. But listen, we love Egypt. They were harshly done by, and I'm very sad that they didn't go through and didn't get that goal. But I'm not going to start. Argentina. Can we say anything about this Argentina team that is not starting with the words Lionel and Messi?
I mean, probably nothing else that's that original. I've kept saying how just experienced and gnarly they are, and that's the truth. Like, they keep finding a way to win. They're like a team full of street fighters with a bit of craft thrown in for good measure, but not that much. Like, I don't know, would you describe McAllister or Fernandez as kind of really creative, crafty players? I think their main strengths are like their doggedness, their desire, their will to win and drive their team forward. And then there's Alvarez and Messi up top. But they're like, I think this is another one that could go to extra time. I think, not a lot of risk will be taken by either team. Argentina hope that moment of magic comes from Messi, and otherwise they're fairly kind of low tempo, largely unimaginative. They have moments where they play kind of quite incisively through the centre of the pitch, because as I said on yesterday's episode, they don't have much width at all. But they do have moments where they move the ball quickly through the centre of the pitch and they look a threat, kind of slightly Aston Villa-esque, like the way they've got like a kind of box midfield to try and play through the middle of the pitch. But I think Switzerland are like, again, a vastly experienced team, a team that have been together and played in major tournaments for a long time now. And so I think this is one that could go to extra time.
I think what we said at the beginning of the tournament, I think it almost stands true here with Argentina. Like they know what they are, like they know what they're about, right? I mean, I think we've said a couple of teams like Belgium, for example, are still sort of, dropping big players and, trying to kind of find their way through on the go. Even Spain, to be honest, are a bit like that. They're having to kind of like warm up as the tournament goes through. Whereas Argentina, they, basically the team is the team. They know how they win matches. And that is a huge advantage. There's no second guessing. This team know exactly what they're about. They know how to win games. Clearly, there's the Messi factor. How can we get the best out of him? But I think look at like Lautaro Martinez, for example, coming on, off the bench. What impact he had in that match, and they have goals in the team. Enzo, we've seen with Chelsea. He knows how to pop up in the box at the right time. I think Argentina are looking. I think they're looking pretty dangerous, actually. Okay, the Egypt game was pretty hairy, but with Messi in this form, I mean, I'm sure you guys have said it so many times, but it really surprised me to see him this good in this tournament. I thought, in the way the pressure would be off here and we might see a kind of Messi unleashed, but just his sharpness has been such a surprise to me. I have to say there was part of me almost that, like, when he scored his like hat trick in the groups, I was like, oh, I don't know, I didn't really share in all the kind of like, everyone loving it. I was a bit like, I was sort of done with this. Like, I thought we were sort of like, after Qatar, I thought like, we'd sort of done all it, like we'd sort of written all the Messi stuff and the Messi hype. We had it for 20 years. Like, is there not something new like going on here? Like, so I felt a little bit sort of cynical about it, but it's kind of grown on me, as the tournament's gone on. I feel like I've sort of got into the Messi thing again. Like, I've had to kind of find those Messi things in my body again, and I'm there now. But in the groups, I was a little bit fatigued by it, to be honest.
Ah, fantastic! I was done with Messi. I had to find Messi again in my. I mean, speaking of the clip economy, Jonathan could ruin you with that one. I think I was done with Messi, not bothered. Tom Allnutt feeling the same about Lionel Messi as I do about this Belgium team. It really that's the shout of the tournament so far. Gregor, we talked about Argentina, Colombia. Is that would have been incredibly exciting, feisty, two South American sides against each other. Is there any world in which that actually, from a footballing point of view, this experienced Switzerland team, Murat Yakin, the best dressed manager in the competition as well, I should say, what a suave little gent that he is on the sideline. Is there a world in which this is a better chance for us to see an upset, a better test for Argentina from Switzerland than it would have been if it was all the kind of anger and passion and things of two South American sides?
Possibly. I'm not sure it's going to be better for them, from an entertainment value point of view. As I say, I think Switzerland are fairly unadventurous and don't have much creative spark or like cutting edge. Mbolo leads the line well, and Doy's a willing runner, and behind that they're like vastly experienced and organised. And obviously, like the loss of Manzabi to a knee injury has been a big blow. His sort of impact has been the big difference maker for them a lot in several games. So, I just as I say, I can't see beyond a kind of cagey game, unless like Messi opens it up with a moment of magic and Switzerland have to do something different. You look at their games so far; they've been really kind of low. Look, they beat Bosnia and Herzegovina 4-1, but there were some late goals in that. There was a draw with Qatar at the start. They 2-1 against Canada was an edgy one. The Algeria game 2-0, and then threw in penalties. So they're not you look at the kind of stature of those opponents, and I don't think they've really faced a proper team yet. Colombia are a good side, and there've been some really good games that they've been involved in the tournament, but I think they lacked a kind of cutting edge. Certainly did in that game last night as well. So, I'm loath to say it. Like I say, I just think that it could be a really cagey one, this.
Yeah, Argentina win in the end then. We talked about the not facing a test and things earlier, Tom. Getting past Cabo Verde and Egypt 3-2, having to come back, having to use Messi again. Think they'll do the same here? Yeah,
I think they'll win this game. I don't know. Colombia would have been, in my opinion, slightly more of a sort of more of an intriguing tie, because I think, the matchup would have been, I don't know, I like the way Colombia kind of attacked and a bit more speed. And I just think maybe Swiss, I agree with Gregor. I think it will be a cagey match and almost a bit like the kind of Morocco-France game. I think, you can't out cage Argentina really. Like they'll sort of find a way, right? Like, and I want to find an upset in this round, but this is not high on my list.
My gut tells me Argentina will again find a way. They're really like the emotion in this side and in the stadiums and so many games they've been involved in has been extraordinary. I mean, you watch players like Martinez was in tears when they equalised in the game against Egypt. Like there's still a winner to come, and then celebrations afterwards. But the players were in tears just at the kind of knowing that they dragged it back, they pulled it out of the bag. So I don't know whether that's a good thing actually or not going forward, but it's certainly it's been a force for them so far, and I think they'll come through this game just.
Argentina find a way again, which would mean that we have semi-finals that we did predict, Gregor. We got there in the end, with terrible shouts along the way, but that would mean that we'd have a France-Spain and England-Argentina semi-finals. Oh, can you imagine? That would be so exciting. We'll leave it there for now. We'll come back to those semi-finals and whatever they may be next week. We'll be getting more insights, I should say, from Paul Hurst, who is in the Argentina camp in the coming days, and we'll hear from Matt Lawton and Johnny Northcroft with England to preview their game with Norway. But for now, thank you very much to Tom Allnutt and Gregor Robertson for joining me today. Thank you too for listening. We'll be back tomorrow to review France v Morocco. We'll see you then.